Hi, my name is Connie, and today I'll be presenting on the subject of X-linked disorders. Areas of discussion in this video will include what X-linked disorders are, who is susceptible to acquiring an X-linked disorder, how X-linked disorders are transmitted, as well we'll be able to look at some examples of X-linked disorders and their inheritance patterns. Before jumping right into X-linked disorders, we're going to look a bit into some background information first. So the human body is made up of trillions of cells, and inside each of these cells there are typically 46 chromosomes with a complete copy of genes. 22 pairs of autosomes and 1 pair of allosomes make up the 46 chromosomes. Looking at the karyotype that I've just pulled up on the screen, you can see that there are 22 numbered pairs of autosomes and 1 pair of chromosomes that do not match in size at the bottom here. This is the 1 pair of allosomes. What's so important about this pair of allosomes is that they determine the genetic sex of the individual. Females will have 2 X chromosomes, while males will have both an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. Looking at this karyotype, you can tell that it belongs to a male. You can also notice that the X chromosome is significantly larger than the Y chromosome. As the X chromosome is much larger than the Y chromosome, it therefore has more space to carry more genes on it than the Y chromosome does. Quantitatively, the X chromosome carries over 1,000 genes compared to the 307 genes that the Y chromosome carries. Obviously, there are genes on the X chromosome that are not found on the Y chromosome. Keep this in mind for the rest of the video, as it is a very important concept. Also, please note that only mothers can pass on an X chromosome to sons, and that fathers donate one of the 2 X chromosomes that daughters possess. This is important in the examples that we'll be looking at. X-linked disorders occur when there is 1 or more mutations of genes that are located on the X chromosome. There are 2 types of inheritance patterns, the first being X-linked recessive and the second being X-linked dominant. We'll start off by looking at X-linked recessive inheritance. X-linked recessive disorders occur when there's a mutation of a gene on the X chromosome and it is expressed when there isn't a normal copy of the gene present. This being said, males are the most affected by the X-linked recessive disorders as they don't have an extra X chromosome with a healthy allele of the affected gene on it that can serve to mask the trait. Therefore, if the X chromosome of a male is affected, he will always express the trait. Females won't express the trait if they are heterozygous, though they will be a carrier. They will be able to pass the gene on to her offspring in the future. Females can be affected, though it is a very rare occurrence, as both X chromosomes must have the mutated alleles of the gene. In the next slide, I've just listed a few X-linked recessive disorders, which you can look into in your own time. The red-green color blindness is a very common X-linked recessive disorder, and I've included one of the tests on the side here. Affected individuals with red-green colored blindness will not be able to see the number in the center of this image. In this first example, we're crossing a carrier mother with an unaffected father. I've put the mother's genotype in the purple boxes on the left and the father's genotype in the blue boxes at the top of the Punnett square. There's a 25% chance of having a carrier daughter and a 25% chance of having an unaffected son from the mother donating the X chromosome with the mutated allele. There's also a 25% chance of having an unaffected daughter and a 25% chance of having an unaffected son from the mother donating the normal X chromosome. In the next example, we're crossing an affected father with an unaffected mother. Note that if the father is affected, automatically, if he has a daughter with a woman, she will be a carrier. And this is because the father donates his 1 X chromosome to his daughter, and in this case, the only one he has to donate is an affected X chromosome. So we can see here that there's a 50% chance of having a carrier daughter and a 50% chance of having an unaffected son who will accept his mother's normal unaffected X chromosome. Though females typically aren't susceptible to X-linked recessive disorders, they are able to acquire them if both parents have affected alleles on their X chromosomes. There's a 25% chance of having an affected daughter when both parents donate X chromosomes with an affected allele, and a 25% chance of having a carrier. which comes from the father donating his affected X chromosome. There's also a 25% chance of having an affected son and a 25% chance of having an unaffected son. If both parents were affected, all of their offspring would be affected as well, as there wouldn't be an unaffected X chromosome to pass along to the offspring. The other type of X-linked inheritance is called X-linked dominant inheritance, which occurs when a parent has a mutation on the X chromosome and passes it down to their offspring. There is only affected or unaffected rather than having a carrier option. Heterozygous females will therefore express the trait and be considered as affected. As it will always be expressed if present, the frequency of being affected by an X-linked dominant disorder is relatively equal in males and females. As females have two X chromosomes, though, they do have a higher chance of acquiring an X-linked dominant disorder. That being said, females sometimes have a milder phenotype if they're heterozygous, as they do have an extra X chromosome with a normal allele of the concerned gene. In this slide that I've just listed, there are some types of X-linked dominant disorders that you can look up and learn more about. In this example here, we're crossing an affected mother with an unaffected father. Though this daughter looks like a carrier, remember that in X-linked dominant inheritance, she will be affected. There's a 25% chance of having an affected daughter, a 25% chance of having an unaffected daughter, a 25% chance of having an affected son, and a 25% chance of having an unaffected son. In the second example here, there's a 50% chance of having an affected daughter and a 50% chance of having an unaffected son. Remember that the father is donating his affected X chromosome and she's becoming affected due to that. Also, if I asked you to distinguish if this pedigree showed an X-linked dominant disorder as opposed to an autosomal dominant disorder, you would go about doing this by making sure no affected father passed on the trait to their sons, and this stems back from only mothers being able to donate X chromosomes to their sons. And that just wraps up my presentation. Thank you for listening and have an excellent day.